I know him and Hazel E are dating. What do you think of her? And do you approve of her, of the relationship?
I don't know yet. I need to probably sit down and have some dinner with her and see what she's talking about. She seems to be like a nice young lady, but...
Okay, so what do you think about the age gap between them? I know she's like 40.
You know that moment when a celebrity story drops and your brain instantly says, "No way, this is real." That's exactly how this one hits. Because when Blueface finally started talking about his own mother, it didn't sound like family drama anymore. It sounded like something that had been buried for years and accidentally slipped out. The kind of truth that makes people uncomfortable because it explains too much. For a long time, fans laughed this off as chaos and clout. Clips went viral, memes flooded timelines, and everyone treated it like entertainment. But the mood changed the second Blueface stopped joking and started explaining. His tone wasn't angry. It wasn't dramatic. It was exhausted. Like someone who had been holding in the same thought for way too long. This wasn't one argument or one bad moment. It was a pattern slowly coming into focus. Control disguised as concern, guilt wrapped in love, and emotional boundaries that never really existed. Once people started connecting the dots, old moments didn't feel funny anymore. They felt disturbing. And that's when this story stopped being gossip and started feeling dangerous. Because when family crosses lines quietly, nobody notices at first. There's no villain music, no warning signs, just confusion masked as love. And what Blueface exposed wasn't just shocking. It was the kind of truth that makes you realize this story was never meant to be funny for years. The relationship between Blueface and his mother played out in public like a chaotic side plot nobody could escape. Interviews went left, Instagram lives turned tense, and family arguments spilled into timelines without warning. Fans brushed it off as that's just their dynamic, because celebrity families are expected to be dysfunctional. But something about this situation always felt louder, messier, and more uncomfortable than the usual Hollywood drama. At first, people treated it like entertainment. Clips were reposted, reaction videos flooded YouTube, and jokes turned into memes. The internet has a habit of laughing at things it doesn't understand yet. But the laughter shows up early, and the silence comes later, once the context finally lands. That silence is exactly what started creeping in when Blueface changed how he spoke. Instead of yelling, he explained. Instead of crashing out, he clarified. And that shift made people lean closer instead of scrolling past. His words didn't sound like someone chasing sympathy or clout. They sounded like someone trying to explain a pattern that had followed him his entire life. What he described wasn't a single blow-up or a one-time disagreement. It was years of emotional pressure hiding behind the word love, control that came dressed as protection, guilt framed as concern, boundaries that were never respected because "I'm your mother" was treated like an all-access pass. Suddenly, old moments started replaying differently. That awkward energy in interviews didn't seem funny anymore. Those comments that once sounded dramatic now felt calculated. People started realizing that this wasn't about fame changing him. It was about him finally recognizing what had always been there. The most unsettling part was how calm he sounded. There was no screaming, no insults, no theatrics. Calm is dangerous because it signals clarity. And clarity is what exposes uncomfortable truths without needing to exaggerate them. When someone speaks calmly about chaos, it usually means they've lived in it long enough to understand it. As fans dug deeper, they noticed how often his mother positioned herself at the center of his life, not beside him, above him. Every relationship, every decision, every public move seemed to require her approval or commentary. That level of involvement didn't feel supportive anymore. It felt possessive. The internet began splitting into sides almost instantly. One side defended her automatically, repeating the same line over and over. "That's his mom." The other side started asking questions no one wanted to answer. When does care turn into control? When does love stop being protective and start being invasive? And why does everyone get uncomfortable the moment those questions are asked? Blueface didn't accuse her of hating him. He didn't say she wanted him to fail. What he described was far more complex and far more disturbing. He described emotional ownership, the idea that his success, his choices, and even his identity belong to someone else. That kind of control doesn't need violence to be damaging. It works quietly. People began pulling up old clips with fresh eyes. Moments that once felt random now looked intentional. Reactions that once felt exaggerated suddenly made sense. When patterns reveal themselves, denial becomes harder to maintain. And once denial cracks, discomfort takes its place. What made this hit harder was how relatable it became. Comment sections filled with people saying they had lived through similar dynamics. Parents who couldn't let go. Family members who used guilt as leverage. Love that came with strings so tight they felt like chains. This story stopped being celebrity gossip and turned into a mirror. The first wave of backlash wasn't loud outrage. It was confusion. People didn't know how to react because questioning a mother feels taboo. Society teaches us that parents are automatically right and children are automatically ungrateful. Blueface shattered that script by speaking without disrespect but without fear. And that's what scared people the most. Not the allegations, but the composure. Because when someone speaks calmly about emotional damage, it suggests they've already processed it. And when someone processes trauma publicly, it forces everyone watching to reflect privately. By the end of his explanation, it was clear this wasn't a rant. It was a release. A long-delayed attempt to reclaim emotional space that had never been his to begin with. And the moment that realization settled in, the internet knew this wasn't going to fade quietly. Once the story hit full circulation, the internet did what it always does when it senses blood in the water. It didn't ask questions quietly. It didn't wait for context. It sprinted straight into chaos with screenshots, clip compilations, and hot takes that sounded confident but were built on vibes. Suddenly, everyone became an expert on family dynamics, emotional health, and parenting, all from their phone screens. TikTok turned the situation into a forensic investigation overnight. Old videos were slowed down, zoomed in, and replayed like Zapruder footage. People weren't laughing anymore. They were analyzing tone, posture, timing, and reactions. When the jokes disappear and the analysis starts, you know the story crossed into uncomfortable territory. Humor stepped aside and suspicion took the mic. Memes still existed, but the energy changed. They weren't playful, they were uneasy. The kind of jokes people make when they're trying to cope with something that feels too real. Every viral post carried the same undertone. Why does this feel wrong now? Because context has a funny way of ruining comedy. What made things explode further was how consistent the pattern looked once people lined it up. It wasn't one clip or one quote. It was years of behavior stacked together. Constant involvement. Public commentary on private matters. Emotional positioning that placed a parent at the center of a grown man's identity. The more people saw, the harder it became to unsee. Celebrity reactions were subtle but loud at the same time. Nobody wanted to name names, but the captions told the story. Quotes about boundaries, independence, and emotional growth flooded timelines. Hollywood doesn't confront, it hints. And those hints were flying like warning shots. Meanwhile, the defenders came out swinging, loudly, passionately, repeating the same argument as if volume could replace logic. She's his mom became the shield of choice, used to block any uncomfortable question from landing. But repetition doesn't turn a weak argument into a strong one. It just exposes how fragile it is. What really shifted the narrative was how Blueface responded to the noise. He didn't spiral. He didn't clap back. He didn't perform outrage for clicks. He stayed measured, which somehow made people angrier. Calm ruins narratives built on chaos. It forces listeners to pay attention instead of picking sides emotionally. His explanations didn't escalate, they clarified. And clarity is dangerous because it removes excuses. Public outrage hit a strange crossroads. Some people doubled down on denial, insisting this was disrespect disguised as honesty. Others leaned in harder, saying this was exactly what emotional control looks like when it's normalized. The conversation stopped being about him and turned into a debate about families everywhere. That's when the comments got personal. People started sharing stories that mirrored the same dynamics. Parents who refused to let go. Love that came with emotional strings attached. Support that turned into surveillance. The more stories poured out, the clearer it became that this wasn't rare. It was familiar. Media coverage tried to water it down. Headlines softened the language, calling it family tension and disagreements. But the public wasn't buying it, because tension doesn't linger like this. And disagreements don't leave people feeling unsettled long after the video ends. The most ironic part was how quickly people blamed fame. As if money suddenly teaches parents to cross emotional boundaries. As if success creates control issues out of thin air. Fame didn't create the dynamic, it just put a spotlight on it. And spotlights don't invent behavior. They reveal it. As reaction videos multiplied, so did discomfort. Influencers tried to stay neutral and failed miserably. You could hear the hesitation in their voices, the pauses between sentences. When content creators struggle to joke, it means the topic isn't funny anymore. The vibe had shifted permanently. Every new clip felt heavier than the last. Not because of what was said, but because of what it implied. Emotional ownership doesn't scream, it whispers. It hides behind concern, loyalty, and sacrifice. And once people recognize that whisper, it becomes loud. The public didn't know who to root for anymore. This wasn't a hero-villain story. It was messy, layered, and uncomfortable. And stories like that don't trend because they're entertaining. They trend because they hit something real. By the end of this phase, outrage wasn't explosive. It was simmering. The kind that sits quietly and changes how people see everything moving forward. Opinions hardened. Lines were drawn. And no amount of memes could put the toothpaste back in the tube. The internet had done what it always does best. It took a personal truth and turned it into a cultural conversation. And once that happens, there's no going back to pretending this was just drama. After the noise died down, the aftermath didn't arrive with explosions or viral meltdowns. It arrived quietly, which somehow made it heavier. Public appearances felt different, interviews became cautious, and the energy around the situation shifted from chaos to discomfort. Silence replaced shouting, and silence always means something changed. For Blueface, the cost of speaking didn't show up as cancellation or praise alone. It showed up in distance. Emotional space that once felt crowded suddenly felt necessary. When someone finally draws a boundary, it doesn't feel empowering at first. It feels lonely. Public perception of his mother didn't collapse overnight, but it cracked. People stopped defending automatically and started hesitating. That pause was everything. Once people hesitate, the pedestal lowers on its own. The most uncomfortable realization was that nothing he described sounded extreme once people sat with it. There were no shocking crimes, no explosive accusations, no cinematic villains. Just emotional patterns that felt disturbingly familiar. And familiarity is what made this linger. Relationships around him began to feel strained in subtle ways. Support became quieter, conversations more careful. When a truth disrupts a long-standing dynamic, everyone involved has to relearn their role. Not everyone wants to do that work. The internet moved on, as it always does, but the stain didn't fully fade. Stories like this don't disappear, they settle. They change how future moments are interpreted. Every interaction going forward would be viewed through a new lens, whether anyone admitted it or not. What stood out most was how composed he remained. There was no victory lap, no "I told you so" moment. Just someone who looked relieved to have finally said what had been sitting in their chest for years. Relief doesn't look glamorous, but it's honest. This situation forced an uncomfortable conversation people usually avoid. Can love still be harmful? Can concern cross into control without bad intentions? And why do we defend certain behaviors just because they come from family? Fans who once laughed now watched more carefully. Comment sections weren't as loud anymore, but they were more thoughtful. The shift from reaction to reflection marked the true end of the chaos. When people start thinking instead of reacting, The damage has already been done. The scariest part is that this story doesn't feel finished. It feels paused, like the calm moment before another truth slips out accidentally. Families with unresolved control issues don't resolve them publicly. They fracture slowly, and when the next headline appears, it won't feel shocking. It will feel inevitable. People will scroll, nod, and say they saw the signs a long time ago. Because once a pattern is revealed, surprise is no longer an option. This wasn't about destroying someone's image. It was about exposing how fragile public narratives really are. Fame doesn't protect anyone from emotional damage, it just broadcasts it. And once broadcasted, it lives forever. The truth didn't scream in this story. It spoke calmly. And calm truths are the ones that stay with you the longest. If this story made you uncomfortable, congratulations, that means it worked. Real scandals aren't always loud, violent, or headline-friendly. Sometimes they're quiet, emotional, and way too familiar. If you think what was exposed here goes deeper than people want to admit, say it in the comments. And if you think everyone's overreacting, don't be shy, argue your case below. Now smash that like button like it owes you rent money. Subscribe like you're tired of watered-down takes and fake outrage. Turn on notifications because these stories don't come with warnings, and neither do we. If you blink, you miss the truth leaking out. This channel isn't here to protect feelings or babysit narratives. We break down patterns, not excuses. We talk about the stuff people laugh at first and understand too late. Because fame doesn't erase flaws, it magnifies them. Drop your thoughts below, because this comment section is where the real conversations happen. Tell us if you've seen similar dynamics play out with other celebrities. Tell us what story you think is next. And don't pretend this is the last time something like this is going to surface, because scandals don't disappear, they evolve. And when the next uncomfortable truth drops, you already know where to find it. This is Fame Flaws, where fame cracks, masks fall, and the truth never stays quiet. Never